Welcome to today's session. Today we're going to be talking about physical health. Now, what do I mean by physical health? Well, physical health means that you're free from illness or injury. In my well-being practice, I have three pillars that I talk about. One is physical health, one is mental health, and one is emotional health. And if you think of those pillars like supporting a tripod, every single one of those pillars has to be firm and secure for the tripod to stand up. If one of those are out of balance, then the other three can't operate on their own. So you were sharing a really interesting story earlier about your own physical health journey.
Yes, so I used to work for a company, and this is a few years back now, and I covered for them different international locations, which then meant I was working across different time zones, and it was a high pressurized job, I have to admit that. And as a result, wanting to get things done, working in the different time zones, it meant I didn't have time to say I'm going to prep meals, take it with me to work. The easiest option for me was to go down to the cafe below, get a sandwich, get a packet of crisps, and get a fizzy drink, because you got the 3-in-1 for a special. That became a pattern in terms of, I used to do that regularly because it was easy sitting at my desk, eating and working. Over a period of time, and I didn't link it actually, to be honest with you, at that stage, I became sluggish, I became tired, constantly tired, and I just put it down. I was doing long hours. I didn't think maybe my eating habits is having an impact in terms of the way I feel as well. And they talk about having a foggy brain. I had that constantly as well. So if you were coaching me then, what would you advise me in terms of what could I do to move away from that space I was in?
Absolutely. So I'm assuming you were quite stressed at that sort of time.
Very stressed as well.
And it can be quite hard when you're feeling stressed to think about eating healthy. You just want the quick hit.
Yeah.
You just want something to be easy. So it can be quite difficult to look after your physical health when you're in a high stress work environment. But actually, if you go back to that tripod, if you think about it, when you're highly stressed, that's when you really think about, well, what's going to help feed my body and keep me healthy. Because if you're stressed and then you have ill health on top of that, then that's going to make life more stressful. If you're extremely stressed, then you can start to see physical ailments as well. And that brain fog and that sluggishness that you were talking about are one of the first warning signs that, oh, actually, my mental and physical health are so intrinsically linked. And so one now is beginning to impact the other. So it's really thinking about those small changes that you can make one by one.
Which is quite interesting, because what is quite funny is that obviously with the eating habits I was having, not moving, the weight would creep on. And I think I was at my heaviest then, if I think back, and I hate looking at photos of back then. And the thing is, I went from the one extreme to the next extreme. From I'm uncomfortable with myself, I'm not fitting into my clothes anymore, I'm having to buy a dress size bigger, and I'm like, I don't like this. And I then went to the complete extreme of going completely healthy in terms of what I was eating, and then joining the gym as well. But that didn't make me happy. I felt like I was forced doing stuff that I didn't want to do.
Which makes it really hard to keep up.
Exactly. So I used to go, I didn't go. And I used to look for excuses in terms of not going. Oh, this piece of work needs to be done, so I'll skip gym now. Get home, I'm so tired and I don't feel like going to cook. So what do? I fall back onto the old habit of going to get something very quick to eat. The ready-made meals that it's available these days, just pop it in the microwave and you can have that as well. And like I said, I went from the one extreme to the next, and because I didn't feel happy with myself doing the healthy and the exercising, because I felt I was punishing myself and forcing it upon me, I just went back to my old habits.
And this is the downward spiral that can happen when we go from one extreme to the other. Our bodies tend to be quite hardwired to avoid change, massive change, because it tends to feel quite uncomfortable and it tends to feel challenging. And you've experienced that firsthand. So the way to cajole the body into making changes is to actually take small steps. Now, I have to say, what we're going to talk about next, neither of us are talking from a nutritionist, sports psychologist, sports therapist perspective. We're talking about from our own personal perspective, what we've learned over the years. And the important thing to know is that everybody's different. So while we can share some of the ideas and things that work for us and some of the clients that we've worked with, the thing that I really want to reinforce here is the most important thing is that you try something, you make small changes, you find what works for you, and you find out what you enjoy.
And that makes sense. If I think back about it now, what do they say? Hindsight is 20/20 vision or something like that. I never get these sayings correct, but I think people will still understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And if I did the incremental steps to get to what I was doing in terms of healthy eating and exercising, I realize now I would have been creating a habit. And by the time I got to that extreme, it would not have felt like an extreme method at all.
Absolutely.
Because I built it in slowly.
Yeah.
But I guess I was not being like a baby, learning first to crawl and then walk and then run. I went from crawling immediately to running. And that's why I hated it. But you learn and you speak to people and you listen to what they do, and slowly the weight started coming off. And I think I'm at a point where I'm comfortable with myself, and I have to remind myself you do not want to go back there. The thing I have to say though is that I still don't like exercising, but as much as I dislike it, I won't say I hate it, as much as I dislike it, I do feel though it helps me with my mental health. If not so much physical health, it helps me a lot with my mental health, because it gives me that space to just step away from the issue or problem that I'm going through. And when I come back from, I tend to do HIIT because it's very quick, 10 minutes and that's it, and you're done. I just find if I go back to my desk, then I look at the problem differently.
And that's really important. So one of the worst things that you can do when you're tired is, if you've got a problem, actually sit and try and force the problem. The way to get into flow, the way to actually invoke our creativity, is to actually move our bodies. Now, let's talk about exercise first, because I think people associate exercise with going to a gym. If you've got a little bit of weight to lose, you might feel really self-conscious. But that's not what exercise has to be. It could be something as simple as, instead of running down the stairs to the cafeteria to get that sandwich and that fizzy drink and that packet of crisps, if you're somewhere that's got an open square or open space, just take yourself out and go for a short walk. And you'll be surprised how much that just reinvigorates the body. And quite often you'll find that you're still working, because you might still be thinking about the problem while you're walking. So it's not like you're going away from your desk skiving or anything. You're actually giving your brain the space it needs to think and process. And then quite often when you're walking across the square or walking around the block, there'll be a light bulb moment, and you'll think, oh, yes, I can actually solve it like this. And then you can go back to your desk and solve the problem quite quickly. So just something simple like just getting some fresh air. Breathing is really important too. There's a whole section on breathing that we covered last week. So I encourage you to go and look at last week's video as well, because these two videos kind of go hand in hand.
They do, because I didn't realize I breathe up here. And that's why I run out of breath so quickly. Whereas I need to learn to breathe and take it all the way down and release it slowly. And by breathing up here, I rush things
Mm.
because I got so little breath and I need to use up my breath and then take in the next breath. And again, that makes for me quite a bit. I mean, as much as yes, I've changed my meal plans, I've changed the way I think about exercise, and yes, I'm not in the gym any longer, but I do things I can do at home. I just never thought about the breathing part. And also,
Yeah.
when I exercised as well in the gym, I can remember back now when I used to have a personal trainer, she used to say, Rihanna, breathe, because I was holding in my breath and exercising. Yeah, so that kind of hit home when I
When we did the
when we did
exercises
the
last
exercise
week,
last
I think
week.
that helped a lot.
And I
didn't it?
thought back to her, we should tell me, Rihanna, breathe. Yeah.
So breathing, I think you've probably got the message. Breathing is really important. Breathing right is the key, and you can look at that video. So let's explore a little bit more about the exercise. Now, for me personally, I do love to go to the gym, and like you, I'm on the beginning of my journey with high intensity training. And I read the book by Dr. Michael Mosley, The Fast Diet and everything. And I have to admit, I do really feel a difference with the HIIT training. It does really seem to work, and other people that I've spoken to as well, it works really well. And if you're a little bit heavy, then maybe HIIT isn't right for you. And before you embark on anything like that, it's really good to just have a check-in with your GP and just see what he recommends. Maybe go for a physical health check. If you belong to a gym, then quite often they'll do a health check for you as well, just to make sure that you're okay before you suddenly start running when you haven't before, and really build it up slowly. So with the HIIT, we started, I trained with my husband, and we started literally doing HIIT for about 2-3 minutes, where we do 20-second sprints, and we particularly love the curve treadmill because that moves at the speed that you move at. So as you run faster, it goes faster, and as you slow down, it slows down. And like you, it was sort of 10 minutes of exercise with 20 seconds really pushing hard, then a couple of minutes going calm, 20 seconds really pushing hard. And even that was difficult when we first started. But maybe you're not even there yet where you can even contemplate starting to run. So walking is a good place to start.
Yeah. And sorry, I just remembered now we're using the term HIIT, and I know a lot of you out there will understand what HIIT is, but there might be a few of you watching this video thinking, what are they talking about? So HIIT stands for high intensity interval training. And as Alison explained, you start off slow and then all of a sudden just speed it up and then go slow and speed it up. And you do it for a period of time, so it's kind of getting your metabolic rate racing for that period.
Yeah. And also what they say about HIIT and all the university studies that they've done, the body doesn't like to let go of its stored fat once it's got it. And HIIT is actually really, really good for fooling the body into releasing the stored fat. So if you're actually trying to lose weight, it's a really good strategy. But obviously if you're not there yet and you can't run, then walking is a really good place to start. And that doesn't have to be in a gym. That can be walking up and down stairs, it can be walking around the back garden, it can be walking in your local park. Anywhere that just gets you moving and gets some fresh air into the lungs. Walking outside is obviously better than walking inside because you get the fresh air as well, and so you get the double benefit. But that can be your starting point, or you might like to go and join a gym. I love to swim as well, so when I joined the gym, I found that I used to gravitate more towards the swimming. As I've got fitter, I like to do the strength training because it generally builds tone in the body. And if you've got stronger muscles, then not only are you building the bone density, which is protecting you against future illnesses like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, because it's strengthening the bones and it's strengthening the core. it's making sure that you're avoiding things like back problems in the future, but also you're raising your metabolic rate, so you're actually burning more calories. And when you do exercise, you actually burn more calories when you're resting as well. So if you're doing exercise and you're doing HIIT training and you're doing strength training, maybe a bit of swimming, maybe a bit of walking, then you're really giving yourself the best opportunity to really get in the zone of really good weight loss. But you went from one extreme to the other, and then you kind of reined it back. So what did you do to actually build up the exercise slowly, and what did you do instead? Because you said you didn't like going to the gym.
So you mentioned that you exercise with your husband, and I found I needed somebody to be accountable to.
Oh, okay.
And accountability was quite important for me, but not really accountability in the sense of they're going to be checking up on me. It's more the buddy system. So I would used to see who's also going to the gym, and we'd buddy up and go together, and you'd feel like, you don't want to let that person down, and that person felt like they don't want to let you down. So you'd go together from that point of view. 2 or 3 of us would also go walking lunchtime and say, okay, do we just step away from our desk now and just go for a walk? And we used to do that. And the other thing is, and this is sad, I'm one of those people who need to pay for something to be held accountable. So I got myself a personal trainer.
Okay.
And knowing I'm paying for the personal trainer and how expensive that they can be, it meant I made sure I went for each of those sessions.
Okay.
But I also got a personal trainer, not only for that, but also to learn the techniques properly.
Sure.
So that I knew that I was doing the exercise properly. And she also spoke to me about nutrition. And I think what was quite good, she'd say, Rihanna, I don't think you're exercising and I can go and eat what you want to eat. Something that Rihanna stressed with me is that a lot of, in terms of what we do, has to do with our eating habits. And if you change your eating habits, you will see the difference from that perspective. The exercise is almost an addition to that and will speed up the process. But if you don't exercise and you do all the other stuff in terms of walking, get off one bus stop earlier and then walk home, that type of thing, and I change my eating habits, then I will still see the difference. And it kind of made sense because she's not the only first person that told me that. When I spoke to a nutritionist in the gym, she told me exactly the same thing. And I thought, okay, but I want to do a combination of both. I am going to be changing my eating habits, but I also looked at in terms of I need to make it easy for me.
Yeah.
And I looked at in terms of if I know what's going into my food, it's going to make it that much more easier, and I'm going to make things that I enjoy to eat. So I've learned to prep my food. So I do meal preps, and I do it on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'll make 2 or 3 dishes, and I'll then portion that off and either put it in the freezer or the fridge, so that it doesn't become an issue during the week in terms of what am I going to eat. There's nothing to eat, let's just go grab something fast food. And those are the changes that I brought in.
So we're going to come back to the nutrition later, but there's really good strategies there that you've mentioned. So finding a buddy to exercise with, going for a walk at lunchtime, several people from the office, maybe if you're on the train or the bus to work, getting off a stop earlier and having a little bit of a walk, maybe finding a personal trainer to give you a hand. So all of those things can really help. And the other thing that's really important, find something that you really enjoy. So perhaps it's dancing. Something like dancing is great for physical health. It's very social, so it will also have a great impact on your social life. You're learning different dance steps and dance patterns, so that's also really good for enhancing brain capacity and staving off things like dementia in old age. But the important thing is to start and experiment, find out what you enjoy. Before I started going to the gym and before I started swimming, when I was really very overweight and very sluggish and very tired, all of those things seemed quite daunting to me. And I just started with gentle exercise. I started with things like Pilates. I started with things like yoga, and I built it up from there. So yeah, just get out there and find what you love. Maybe it's the local Zumba class or the local swimming pool, or having a bit of a kick about with the kids at the weekend. But whatever it is, schedule it into your diary, because if you don't and you're busy, it won't happen.
Yeah.
So put that time in your diary, set the time aside, and get started with some fresh air and some exercise.
Yeah. And one of the strategies I use, because I used to love running, there's an app called Couch to 5K.
Okay, that's a good one.
And that is actually a good one. And I can't remember actually over how many weeks it is, but it teaches you to run from being a couch potato to be able to run 5K.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed that, because it was me measuring myself in terms of where have I started and where am I now, and I could actually see the improvement I was making. Unfortunately, I've always had this knee injury. The knee injury came back, so I cannot really run because the impact of the road or the treadmill impacts the knee. But I look for other things that I can do, and I love walking. So a group of girlfriends and I, and this started 2 years ago, we started the Thames Path walk. So we started at the source, and we started at, in terms of the barrier, and we are walking to the source. And a lot of people start at the source and walk to the barrier, but because the barrier is in London, and we are based in London, it made sense to us to start at the barrier and then walk to the source. We've only got, I think, another 50 odd miles to go, and then we'll be at the source. I've got to say, we've done it over 3 years now. But having said that, we did it when everybody was available, so it's difficult to coordinate diaries, and that's why it's taking so long. But that's enjoyable, because we're walking a certain distance, and we're walking to achieve a goal, and so you know that's what you want to do. And when you're walking with people and you're chatting, you don't realize the distance that you're walking.
At the very least, if you're walking, get yourself a pedometer, or quite often your phone has an app that measures your steps. At the very least, aim for 7,500 a day. Ideally, build up to 10,000 or more a day, and see how you can incorporate those small changes into getting more exercise in your life. And so, as you quite rightly said, the nutrition is the balance of that. And honestly, losing weight is probably 75% nutrition, 25% exercise. So, to achieve your fitness goals, whether that's just improving your overall physique, your physical health, whether you want to lose weight, people worry a lot about internal fat, so you can actually be quite skinny. But if you've got a really poor diet, you can actually have a lot of fat around your internal organs, so you can be wanting to lose internal fats. Whatever your goal is, looking at the nutrition is really important. So tell me more about your nutritional journey.
So I think what sparked me on my nutritional journey was the fact that I was feeling uncomfortable in my clothes. And being an Asian woman, you do know we carry a lot of the bulk of our weight around our tummies, and that is dangerous for us because it leads to diabetes, etc. And I think, and my stats is not correct, I might be incorrect here, but I think there is a high rate of diabetes amongst the Asian population.
I think you're right.
And I thought I didn't want to be one of those. And my mom's family, there's quite a number of them that suffers from diabetes, so they're diabetic. And when I see what they go through, I'm like, I don't want to be there. And I think that was the game changer for me. And then I started looking at what is it that I need to eat. And I started slowly saying, okay, I don't need sugar anymore, and I've left the sugar out completely. I do now and then will have something sweet. I am not going to starve myself or say you cannot have that. But I've got to a point now where I don't even have sugar in my coffee or my tea. I don't need it. The other thing as well is that I started feeling uncomfortably internally, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And whatever was putting in my mouth, I was bloating up, and I just couldn't understand what it is. And I went for tests, and then they discovered I've got candida in my gut. And then to be able to get that under control, I had to go on a very, very strict diet. That's all that you can call it. So I had to cut out a number of things, and I was on that for about 2 or 3 months, and I did see the weight come off, and wow, that felt so good. But then slowly I had to start introducing things in to see whether the candida disappeared completely. Unfortunately, in my case, I'm one of those people where it's not gone away completely. So now and again it will rear its head up, and I can see the triggers when that does happen. Again, when I'm stressed, I go back to the wrong things in terms of eating. And then I'll start getting the same symptoms, and I go back in terms of eating healthy. So I'm trying now, I would say 80% of the time, to keep to the healthy side of things, because the way I feel when that triggers start is, it's difficult to describe to someone who doesn't go through it, but if somebody who suffers from IBS, it's similar to that. And I'm like, it's not a nice feeling. So I remind myself constantly about that. Some of the things for me would be dairy. So I do not almond milk. I'd hardly use butter. I'd use ghee because it's clarified butter. And so it's those small changes that I have made. I've never really liked the meat and chicken in this country because I'm originally from South Africa. And I've weaned myself off meat and chicken over here, so I'm predominantly vegetarian, and then fish, which is pescatarian, really, from that perspective. And I find that if you start looking at in terms of what can you eat, how can you eat, there's a lot of options out there. It's just opening up your mind to that. And so unfortunately for me, it was because of the candida, it forced me to have to change my eating habits. From that perspective. Honestly, Alison, whether I would have changed it if I didn't have the issue, I cannot honestly tell you whether I would have or wouldn't.
But I also hear from people like surgeons that people are in a position where they're not going to survive if they don't make the changes, and still their mindset is such that they still don't want to make that changes. And I think the important thing when you're making change around diet and nutrition and exercise, when you think about the mindset, it's about thinking about a reason that is an emotional attachment as to where you're at and what it will feel like, for example, not to be at your child's wedding when they're grown up, or not to be able to, see a certain person or do a certain thing. If you can think for yourself of that emotional reason why you want to change your health for the better because XYZ, then that will actually help you make those changes. But you mentioned a really important number in what you were talking about as well. So you mentioned 80%, and I think that's a really important number to remember, because I think when you're making these changes, it's not about giving up sugar and chocolate and bread and everything all of the time. It's just moving your body towards what is a more healthy diet for you 80% of the time, and then allowing yourself to have a treat 20% of the time. Whatever that treat is for you. And even between us, we have quite different constitutions. So I know that you have quite a lot of grains and stuff in your diet. I don't do well with grains in my diet. I find that if I eat too much of them, I get quite heavy and bloated. For me, my experiment has been that I found that I respond much better to a lot of protein. So I eat a lot of protein and a lot of vegetables, a lot of eggs. So again, it's all about that experimentation, that open mind, that exploration to finding out, well, what does my body want? What does my body need? What does it respond to? What do I feel healthier when I have? So if I had quite a grain-rich sort of rice and pastas and
Constantly.
couscouses and potatoes and
Yeah.
I actually don't do too well on that. If I have lots of eggs, meat, fish, dairy, I'm really good. Especially if I have protein in the morning, then I find I'm a lot less likely to snack, because protein will keep me feeling full. So part of this journey is to find out what works for you, and if you really find it scary, GPs will be able to refer you to a nutritionist that can actually help you, like we said, find a buddy to do some exercise with. If making the food changes feel really unattainable and really scary, find somebody that can actually help you on the nutritional side and advise you and work with you to experiment and find out what works for you. But there was something else that you mentioned a bit earlier, and that's when we're busy, eating healthy can actually feel difficult and quite overwhelming. And I do something that you mentioned earlier. I do the same. I quite often make several meals on a weekend and put them in the fridge or the freezer for later on in the week, so that when I come home I've already got food ready and all I have to do is reheat it. So eating a healthy meal in the evening then becomes easy. But it does mean that there's a certain amount of planning that has to go into that. So I will quite often sit down on a Sunday evening and I will look at my plan, and I will plan out the meals for the week, and that will drive the shopping list, and then on the Monday we'll do the shopping list that we need as well. And so we'll plan it from there. So that's also a really important way to actually think about, well, how can I make my life easier? And there's all sorts of ideas. You can look online, Food Matters or Jason Vale. You know, there's juices, smoothies, easy breakfasts that you can prepare the night before and put them in the fridge if breakfast is the one that you tend to skimp on and you want to get better at. Preparing something simple for lunch the night before that you can take with you. Maybe you've had pasta the night before. And you toss some pasta in with some salad and put it into a bowl to take with you the following day to have as a cold pasta salad. If you're somebody that likes and responds well to pasta. You know, all of these things are just tricks and tips to actually move you towards a healthier lifestyle. But just focus on one thing. So if you want to change your physical exercise and you want to change what you eat, think about it. Well, okay, I'm here today. That's where I'm aiming for. So think about it. Okay, well, for the first few weeks, I'm just going to start walking at lunchtime. For the next few weeks, I'm going to think about, well, what am I having for breakfast? For the next few weeks after that, I'm going to think about developing a healthy eating plan and start getting into the habit of setting time aside during the weekend to actually prepare those meals. And so making those small changes, just one at a time, will just help you towards that goal.
I think what's quite important, I mean, Alison, as you mentioned earlier on, both you and I were talking from our experiences. We're not qualified professionals within this area. And like you also rightly told our viewers to go and speak to people within the area if they want more information. I mean, I spoke to nutritionists and got a lot in terms of menu plans and healthy eating habits. I got that information from them.
Me too.
I went to my GP and said, I want to start doing this. Could you do the full MOT on me? And then also the blood works, he was able to say, you're low on iron, you know, you need to look at incorporating that into your diet. So I just want to emphasize to people to speak to the qualified people out there. And the reason I'm saying that is I looked at what worked for me, and what worked for me might not work for everyone. Because the other thing that I have brought in, and I've been reading up a lot on this, and again, I think you got people that say yes it works, and people will say no it doesn't work. it works for me, and I think it depends on your body type, and also in terms of whether your body is ready to do it or not.
Yeah.
So I do intermittent fasting,
Mm-hmm.
and I do the 16-hour fasting and the 8-hour window in terms of eating. And that fits in actually with my day quite nicely, because if I'm quite busy, I just keep going. And by the time I look at the watch, it's time to have lunch.
Yeah.
And so even though I've skipped breakfast, it's fine, because I've been busy and I'm going to have my 8-hour window. Obviously, I'm not going to sit there and gulp all of this food down. I kind of, okay, I'll have my lunch now, and later on I'll have something like that type of thing. But it also gives me, because I am that type of person, I need to have a routine.
Yeah.
And so if I know what my routine looks like, it's easy for me to stick to the routine. I'm also the sad person in that I don't get bored with having the same thing constantly. Now and then, yes, I will make a change here and there, but most of the time, I would say 90% of the time in the mornings, I'll have yogurt with fruit and chia seeds in that, because that's where my protein comes. The changes will probably come in my meal times, but mornings, it's easy. I can have that, and I can be out by the door if I need to go to a client meeting. So for me, it's routine, and then, as I said, the meal prep, and then very importantly as well, having the accountability. So even though I don't have an accountability buddy right now, I speak to my friends and I put
Mm-hmm.
things out there. I want to do this, and I know they're going to ask me somewhere along the line, have you done it? Have you achieved it? So the fact they're going to ask me makes me want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because I'm probably the polar opposite of you. I don't have a particular routine on a day. My work means that I'm often speaking somewhere at lunchtime, or networking in the evening, or maybe at a breakfast meeting. So I found the intermittent fasting, the way you've described it, really hard. I have found that intermittent fasting has really worked well for me, by doing the 5-2. So I have 2 days where I have a drastically reduced calorie intake, and those 2 days aren't necessarily the same day every week, but I found that I slowly lose weight when I do that. So I think that, and I'm not a breakfast person either, I much prefer to have brunch around 10:30, 11 o'clock. I really don't enjoy breakfast, and that's absolutely fine. It's another one of those things. You'll get one camp of people that tells you you must have breakfast.
I was going to say
you'll
no.
tell you another camp of people
Yes.
will tell you no, breakfast isn't
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
So again, my husband has to have breakfast before we go to the gym. I feel sick if I have breakfast before I go to the gym. I prefer not to.
Yeah.
And then I want to eat when we get back. So again, it's all around experimenting and finding out what works for you. But it just goes to prove, just looking at our own experience, we're polar opposites in the way that we've designed our day. So yeah, I think hopefully that's just given you a few ideas of where to start, and you can post on the comments under this video if you've got any specific questions, and we'll happily post some websites that we found to be very useful. But also, just reiterating what Rayana said, it's really important to, if you're just starting on the journey, have a medical checkup with your GP, find a personal trainer, find a nutritionist, get a buddy to work with you. All of these things will actually just help you start, and the most important step that you make is the first step on that journey.
Yeah.
So I hope you found that useful, and if you've got any questions, do post them in the video, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.